Good evening. Tonight we bring you a special report covering 5 of the most significant and fast-moving stories unfolding across the globe, from an active military conflict in the Middle East to a government crisis crippling American airports, a landmark ruling against one of the world's most powerful technology companies, a fatal collision at one of America's busiest airports, and new revelations in the death of financier Jeffrey Epstein. This is the world as it stands tonight. We begin in the Middle East, where the conflict between the United States and Iran has escalated to levels not seen in modern history. Officials confirmed this week that Iranian forces fired cruise missiles in the direction of the USS Abraham Lincoln, a United States Navy aircraft carrier operating in the Persian Gulf region. The missiles did not strike the vessel, but the incident marks the first time in contemporary history that a state actor has launched a direct weapons attack at an American aircraft carrier. The Pentagon has not yet issued a formal statement on the full extent of the engagement, but sources familiar with the situation confirm that the strike was deliberate and targeted. The USS Abraham Lincoln is one of the most powerful warships in the United States Navy, weighing over 100,000 tons and capable of carrying 90 aircraft, making the attempted strike an extraordinary escalation by any measure. To understand how we arrived at this point, it is necessary to step back several months. Tensions between Washington and Tehran had been intensifying steadily, driven by renewed economic sanctions, the activities of Iranian-backed proxy groups across the region, and a series of diplomatic breakdowns. American forces subsequently launched airstrikes on Iranian military infrastructure, facilities that Pentagon officials described as having been used for decades to project threat against American allies in the region. Iran's military response came swiftly, and it came in the form of cruise missiles aimed at the Lincoln. At the same time as missiles were being fired, however, diplomatic channels were quietly being kept open. The White House confirmed it is actively working to arrange direct talks with Iranian counterparts, with discussions potentially taking place as early as this weekend. President Trump added to the intrigue on Wednesday when he told reporters without elaboration that Iran had provided the United States with what he described as a present worth, in his words, a tremendous amount of money. The president declined to provide any further details, leaving officials and analysts across Washington searching for answers. The statement has fueled considerable speculation, ranging from the release of detained personnel to an intelligence handover to a preliminary diplomatic gesture ahead of formal negotiations. No confirmation has been offered from either side. The conflict has not been contained to a bilateral exchange between Washington and Tehran. Hezbollah, the Lebanese militant organization with close ties to Iran, launched attacks this week against Israeli military logistics infrastructure in northern Israel, a development that signals the potential for a much wider regional conflict. Iran, for its part, has submitted 5 formal conditions that it says must be met before any ceasefire can be considered. American officials have rejected the majority of those conditions. In response, the Pentagon has authorized the deployment of at least 1,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division to the broader Middle East region. Perhaps most alarming to international observers has been reporting that Iran's Bushehr nuclear power facility sustained damage during the fighting. The International Atomic Energy Agency issued an immediate call for restraint, warning that damage to an active nuclear facility in a conflict zone poses risks that extend far beyond the borders of Iran itself. Several neighboring nations, including those in the Gulf Cooperation Council, have expressed grave concern. The situation tonight remains deeply fluid. Peace talks, if they proceed this weekend, could represent a significant step toward de-escalation, but analysts warn that any further miscalculation on either side carries the risk of a far broader confrontation. The situation prompted the Trump administration to deploy immigration and customs enforcement agents to major airports in an attempt to supplement security operations. The move drew immediate criticism from civil liberties groups and Democratic lawmakers who argued that ICE officers are not trained for airport screening duties and that their presence creates a chilling effect for travelers. Congress has yet to reach an agreement. Negotiations broke down again this week, with Republican and Democratic leaders exchanging public statements of blame. Notably, Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat, broke from his party's leadership to describe the continued obstruction as, in his words, a mess. The shutdown now stands as one of the longest Homeland Security funding lapses in American history, with no resolution immediately in sight. Turning now to a domestic crisis unfolding across the United States, where the federal government shutdown at the Department of Homeland Security has entered its 40th consecutive day, a record duration that is now producing tangible and serious consequences for the American public. The shutdown, which began after Congress failed to pass a funding agreement for the department, has left Transportation Security Administration officers working without pay. According to figures released this week by acting TSA leadership, 366 TSA officers have resigned since the shutdown began, citing financial hardship. Those who remain on the job continue to screen passengers at airports across the country without receiving their salaries. Interviews conducted by multiple news organizations paint a stark picture of the personal toll. TSA officers have described taking out emergency loans, visiting food banks, and falling behind on rent and mortgage payments. Airport wait times have meanwhile reached record levels, with the acting TSA director confirming that passenger processing delays are now the highest ever recorded in the agency's history. In New York, federal investigators are piecing together the sequence of events that led to a collision at LaGuardia Airport between an Air Canada passenger aircraft and an airport fire truck. The National Transportation Safety Board has opened a formal investigation into the incident, which occurred in the early morning hours when an Air Canada flight on final approach encountered a fire truck that had moved onto the active runway. Audio recordings recovered from the air traffic control tower captured what investigators described as urgent communications in the moments before impact, including what sources say are repeated commands to stop, commands that came too late to prevent the collision. The NTSB has disclosed that investigators have encountered what it described as conflicting information regarding which tower controller held ground control responsibility at the precise moment the fire truck received or did not receive clearance to cross the runway. The finding raises serious procedural questions about the chain of command at one of the country's most heavily trafficked airports. The incident also generated a diplomatic dimension. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney publicly criticized the chief executive of Air Canada for issuing a statement of condolence in English only, an omission that drew sharp reaction from French-speaking Canadians, who described the response as dismissive and inadequate. The NTSB investigation is ongoing, and full findings are not expected for several months. In a landmark legal development this week, a jury in the state of New Mexico returned a verdict ordering Meta Platforms, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, to pay $375 million in damages. The jury found that Meta's platforms created an environment that enabled the sexual exploitation of children. Specifically, the court found that algorithmic systems within Meta's applications facilitated connections between predatory adults and minors, not as a result of random user activity, but as a consequence of platform design choices made by the company. Child safety advocates and legal experts describe the ruling as historic, while acknowledging that the financial penalty, though substantial in absolute terms, represents less than 1% of the company's annual revenue, which exceeded $40 billion in the most recent fiscal year. The same week, Meta announced that it would be laying off hundreds of employees across 5 separate divisions, including teams working on artificial intelligence research and virtual reality development. The company offered no detailed public explanation for the scope of the cuts. Separately, OpenAI, the artificial intelligence company behind the ChatGPT platform, announced this week that it is discontinuing Sora, its video generation tool, citing a strategic realignment of resources. The twin announcements from Meta and OpenAI mark what analysts are calling the first visible signs of contraction in the whole artificial intelligence sector following several years of aggressive and largely unchecked expansion. And finally tonight, New reporting has cast fresh light on the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein, the financier who died in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York on August the 10th, 2019, while awaiting federal trial on charges related to the sexual trafficking of minors. The official finding from the New York City Medical Examiner was suicide by hanging. That conclusion has been contested by Epstein's legal representatives and by a number of forensic experts since the day it was issued. This week, an investigation published by NBC News disclosed a series of previously unreported details from inside the facility in the hours preceding Epstein's death. These include an account from a correctional officer who reported observing an unusual flash of orange light near Epstein's cell during a routine check. The report also describes a Google search that investigators believe was conducted from within the cell during the period in question and raises questions about the physical construction of the ligature found at the scene. Prison protocol at the time required that Epstein, classified as a suicide risk, be checked every 30 minutes. It has been documented through prior investigations that those checks were not conducted. The cameras nearest to Epstein's cell were, according to federal investigators, malfunctioning on the night of his death. In a related development, a group of Epstein survivors, women who allege they were trafficked to prominent individuals through Epstein's network, have written formally to Buckingham Palace requesting a meeting with King Charles III ahead of an upcoming royal visit to Washington. Their representatives have indicated that the request relates to the documented involvement of individuals with ties to the British establishment in Epstein's network of activities. No response from Buckingham Palace has been made public. Tonight, what each of these 5 stories shares is this. In every case, institutions that were designed and trusted to protect people have been found wanting. The mechanisms meant to prevent conflict, to secure borders, to protect children online, to ensure safe air travel, and to deliver justice, all of them are under strain, and all of them are being scrutinized as never before. That scrutiny by journalists, by courts, by the public, is itself a form of accountability, and accountability, however slowly, is how systems correct themselves. We will continue to follow all 5 of these stories as they develop. Stay with us.